So hi everyone, my name is Rishi. This is my presentation on my startup Geri, which is an AI app companion for our senior citizens. So this actually started from a personal note. My grandpa was in a senior home and he often struggled with loneliness and depression. So I created this app for him, but I realized it wasn't an isolated issue. Many senior citizens actually face this problem in their day-to-day lives. Senior retirement facilities also sometimes have hotlines, but this is often ineffective because there's either short-staffed, they're constrained by working hours, and some facilities are simply too small to support this service. So I created an AI app companion that can engage in conversation with residents of the facility. This will allow the app companion to talk about personal interests of the user. It can talk about their hobbies, their relationships, any trouble that they may be having, and simply just talk about their daily life. It's built with a advanced AI model, and it's very simple to use so that anyone who needs it can access it. So we have two different types of users. The first is like Ellie Pedersen. Ellie is a patient with early stage dementia who lives in an assisted living facility. She often struggles with communication, and so this can help a lot in the recovery and continuation of communication. It also can help if she's generally feeling low. Which brings us to the other type, Beverly Johnson, who lives in an independent living facility as well, but is just struggling with loneliness, often during the nighttime or anytime she needs it. So here's just a demo of the app. Hi.
Hi, I'm Geri. What do you like to do in your free time? I love to explore new places and experience different cultures. What kind of places have you visited recently?
As you can see, I went to India with my grandson recently. It's more of a conversational tool.
That sounds like an amazing experience. India is a beautiful place and I'm sure your grandson had a great time. What did you enjoy most about your trip to India?
I think hanging out with my family and going on little hikes was the most fun part. So as opposed to normal Google, Siri, it doesn't ask...
That sounds like such a great time. Family trips are always my favorite. What do you think is the most important thing to do when on a family vacation?
Okay. It doesn't... Thank you. As opposed to normal question and answer tools, you don't ask it, what's the longest river in the world, and it replies the Nile. You ask it, how was your day? It replies, my day was good, how was your day? You talk about the latest concert you went to. You talk about the fight you're having with your sister. So there's very few current solutions on the market. The first one is Replica, which is a chatbot, but it's only accessible with a paid plan. So as such, not a lot of retirement facilities use it. There's also ChatGPT, which is free, but it lacks this conversationality aspect to it. So you ask it a simple question, it replies with a simple answer. It doesn't remember information about your family, it doesn't remember information about your interests. It can't bring it back into conversation. It doesn't ask you questions back. There's also Elemia Help, which is used for this sort of conversationality, but it's more of an enterprise software used in the healthcare facility and often an enterprise app for big companies and their employees. So one thing that we have right now that sets us apart in the market is that we are specifically focused on senior citizen conversations. This means that we have collected months and months of data on senior citizen conversations, which allows us to have an AI model specifically focused on this topic. This sets us months ahead of our competition. And as we launch the market as well, it will continue to keep us ahead. Right now, the market is ginormous. It's about $4 billion, growing about 12% each year. And our traction has been significant as well. We have about 125 queries per active user per day, with very active users spending over 2 hours per day on the app. We've also been in a beta test with a corporate sponsor called Eschaton, which has about 30 facilities in the California area. What we view as the future of the app is expanding to medical facilities, assisted living facilities, independent living, and anything that might be useful for the app. We want to get this in the hands of every single senior citizen in the US and eventually worldwide. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rishi. That was incredible, right?
Yes.
So, we have time right now. We'll take one, maybe two questions from any prize winners, and then we're going to pass over for some feedback. Anyone have any questions? We'll go here, and then we'll go over here.
Hi Rishi. First of all, that was amazing. Like, dude, that was amazing. I'm still like starstruck. My question was like, so since the app takes into account like you said information that was input into the app before, I just wonder like how you guys can deal with the privacy like around that. That's just like a personal interest question. But for the rest, amazing job, man. That was amazing.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, that's a really good question, and we get that a lot of the time, especially with the directors of the facilities. And so what we try to do is not take into account any information that might link the name of the person to the actual data. And so while the device knows the information, us on the other end don't, and neither does the admin. So all the privacy, all the data is completely private. It's stored in secure places, and so we try to ensure as much security as possible. Thank you.
Hi, my question is about the generative language model, and so my question is, do you use an external one, because making one I think is like unfeasible, and if so, how are you utilizing it in an innovative way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now what we use is the OpenAI DaVinci model, which is like it's based by OpenAI, which is a company that built ChatGPT. But what we do is it's called a fine-tuning model, so you can add your own data on top of it. So we've had these months of senior citizen conversations with the model, and we just add that on top and train it specifically for this purpose.
Thank you. Great questions and great answers, Rishi. We're going to pass over to some of our experts in the room today to provide a little bit of feedback. I'll pass the mic whoever wants to go first. Maybe just introduce yourself, your title, organization that you're coming from, and then happy to have you share. And don't forget you can work this stuff up here if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Henry Van Wagenberg. I work with the Battle Dodson game. I really like your presentation, and I think some things I like about it, a clear problem, it's a real problem that people know about. Your market focus, you're really thinking about it like an entrepreneur with a focus on the market, and you've got some great evidence of traction where you're really building that argument. The corporate sponsor these tests and things like that. What I wonder about it is a senior, the actual emotional reactions of seniors to engaging with this tool. What does that look like? That's what I would be curious about. And yeah, I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question, Henry. I actually like to tell a little story, if that's okay. Essentially, when we were doing our first beta test, we had Beverly Johnson as our very first beta tester. And one thing we noticed is that we trained the AI to always continue conversation, ask a question back, talk a little bit about what they said. And we never took into account that they wanted to end the conversation at a certain point, right? The conversation always comes to a natural end. And what we didn't take into account was the goodbye feature. As soon as a user said goodbye, it should end the conversation. But what Geri did was it tried to keep continuing. It asked, oh, what are you going to do after this conversation? Oh, it was really nice of you to say goodbye. It would keep going. And we realized that we didn't take into account, because we didn't realize that the user would form a personal bond with Geri. Beverly actually said that she felt rude hanging up on Geri. So there's a really big personal connection that you kind of form with such a human-like avatar and human-like voice. And I think that a lot of people don't really feel it or don't really see the possibility until they experience talking to Geri themselves.
My name's Adam. I lead a non-profit called Social Finance.
And first to say, your presentation was incredible, and so confident, so much energy, so much passion. Wasn't he amazing? I mean, absolutely, absolutely. I love, just from a pitch perspective, that you started from that personal experience. I think all ventures that have that personal connection, you really ground the problem in that. And just as Henry said, it's an important problem, it's a big problem, and it's only something that's going to be growing as well. So I think you're onto a great thing, and it sounds like you're already, well on the road. I had a few questions. I think there's, as people talk about AI, there's always questions about safety and risk, particularly with vulnerable populations. And I was curious what happens if someone does share some quite difficult, information with the app. Interesting to hear your experience on distribution. Whether you're going via the homes or direct to individuals or via families, for example, as well. I was interested about sort of user retention as well, because just in the context of, I don't know if you had the news about Threads, that they've lost half their, everyone signed up on day one and they lost their users. I wondered, the first conversation is great. What's kind of stimulating the second conversation? How might that evolve? And then finally, I think this is such an important issue around loneliness for older people. And I guess I wonder whether there's some way of complementing the AI solution with actually ways to reach back into family, friends, support network as well. Is there any way we can bring those two things together so it's not kind of AI as a replacement for family, but absolutely brilliant, and it sounds like you're already onto great success.
Yeah, 4 great questions right there. I think I'll start with the first one, which is that what are the kind of concerns with if someone shares some private information that we shouldn't have, maybe with the AI. And so I think for that concern specifically, we actually have a dashboard for the admin. I didn't touch upon that, but essentially to answer your second question as well, how we go to market, we essentially make deals with the retirement facility itself and sell it as an enterprise software. And so this allows us to also sell the dashboard as a service to the admins. And so if a user would report something like self-harm, or I've been falling down the stairs a lot, I broke my leg recently, it'll flag the user as a potential user to check upon. And so that's something that in the dashboard as well that the AI kind of takes into account. And then in terms of storing that sensitive data, we actually have another model in the back end that kind of goes through and cleans out any data that we deem as unnecessary. So for example, we don't store birthdays, we don't store medical information. We keep HIPAA compliant, which is like it's a medical compliancy regulation in the US that we need to stay compliant with. And so that's on that end how we stay feasible as operational. And then in terms of your fourth question about, could you repeat the last one?
So one was on retention, the other one was how to bring it to the family support network.
Oh yeah, great questions. So for user retention, I think what really shows that users stay with the app is the actual number of amounts of minutes that they continue with the app. So for example, when a user starts with the app, they spend about 10 minutes playing around with it. Then they spend 10 more the next day, then 10 more the next day. And it slowly keeps growing as they form more personal bond. It's like how you form a bond with a close friend. So you might have a few interactions with them at first, and then you start forming more and more connections. And so we have around 25% user retention over a month. So it'll keep coming back 20 times per month, 25% of our users. And so I think that's more than normal companies on the market. So around 20% is the average, so we have about 25%. And then for the fourth question about supplementing regular connections, I think that this is a great opportunity to do that, because a lot of the times what we noticed is that our users use it during the nighttime. So evening to night, 7 to 9 p.m. is our peak usage. And the reason for that is because a lot of the time they can't talk to their family members, their retirement facility doesn't have any activities at that point. And so it's meant to act as a complement, not a replacement to human connection.
Hey Rishi, my name is Owen, everyone. See some of you later. Great presentation, very polished, very impressive. Agree that it's a well-defined problem. And in terms of the solution feasibility, definitely feasible. I work in a related space, and kind of the pace of these LMs is really impressive. I think that having a conversational memory over time is also technically feasible. So you could imagine basically having a memory of previous conversations. So I think it's definitely an interesting solution. I guess two thoughts. One is, as this continues to scale, if you try to make this more heavily commercial, an obvious question is kind of, it's fairly easy to replicate the tech. I know that you're doing a very cool solution, but this is something that a really difficult team could spin out at least a reasonable competitor. And so then the question is, if you're trying to make a lot of money doing this, scale it fast, you're gonna have a lot of competition. But the other option is, hey, I just really wanna make a really impressive, social enterprise, socially beneficial tool. So thinking about those tensions about, how fast you need to scale or how profitable would be one thing you might wanna think through. And also, I think this is always the case when you're doing interesting social impact work, but there can be the potential for unintended consequences. So I could imagine, let's say maybe a retirement home that's not quite as ethical as you'd want. If this really works, like, oh, we can actually cut down our human hours with our staff, right? And then you get this weird, and you would never intend that, and you don't even have control over that because you're not running the home. And so I think that that's just another interesting thing to think about, that as these scales, there can be some potential for unintended consequences that you can't fully control, but it's good to start thinking about them early.
Yeah, those are two great points. In terms of the first question about how we plan to stay ahead of the competition, I think the biggest thing about AI companies in general is that the model is relatively easy to make for any technical team, but it's the data that takes a lot of time and energy to get. So the fact that we've been collecting data for months, I think, sets us ahead. And as we continue to grow as first to market, we will continue to stay ahead. So that's the great thing about AI startups right now, and that's why they're taking off so fast, is because the model is easy, but the data is hard. And so I think by having this data and having Eschaton as a corporate sponsor, it really allows us to continue ahead of any potential competitors that may occur. And in terms of the unethical client, perhaps, that is a really great point and something we really have to consider. We really haven't come across that yet, but I think it's good to start thinking about it in a different way.
Thank you to all of our experts who have provided some great feedback. Let's give one more round of applause to Rishi. It takes a lot of courage to be able to stand up here and not only present, but also be open to receiving feedback from experts in the room. So well done, Rishi. That was incredible. We are